Well, welcome back to the MAJO Podcast, Real, Raw, Unfiltered. I'm Derek, and I'm here with Jason. If you missed last week's episode, Bariatric Real Talk, Poop, Skin, and Sex, go check that one out. That was a good conversation, opened up a lot of topics and things that a lot of people don't talk about or say out loud, or questions that they don't ask. If the episode didn't land in your algorithm, well, it's probably because you're not following us. So help the robots help you. Click that follow and that subscribe button. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts, so you don't miss the next one. Today's conversation is one I think a lot of people are quietly wrestling with, being labeled lazy, unmotivated, or broken. And it's one that hits close to home for me as somebody with ADHD. So when what might actually be going on is something very different. We've got two great voices with us today, my friend Marcus and my other friend Scott, who's here to have this conversation with us. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. Whoever wants to go first, and then we'll jump into it.
I'll jump right in. My name is Marcus Jackson. Uh, Cadence also is a name that some people know me by if they know me from my music side of my life. But I'm a husband, father, founder of a nonprofit in Northeast Oklahoma City. We currently serving over 200 teenagers and holistically, but one of the ways is mental health. So this conversation actually trickles down and what I'm seeing, not just what I've lived with, as a man growing up in Northeast Oklahoma City and limited mental health information, but seeing that now with teenagers, not having those type of conversations. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I'm Scott. As Derek mentioned, I'm a psychologist here in the Oklahoma City area, co-owner of the Well Psychology and Counseling, and do psych assessment as my primary kind of clinical activity. I do a lot of therapy too, but a lot of psych assessment, and a lot of the referrals I get are ADHD related. And that's all age ranges, kiddos, but I get a ton of adults referred that have struggled with this their entire life and are kind of like, I think I've been undiagnosed. It can be other things, of course, as well, that we'll probably talk about. So it's hard to always differentiate what's ADHD, what's not. And then, the impact of it. So I see it all day long. And so really enjoying the opportunity to talk about it because it is something that's probably my biggest referral question I get. I would say that and autism. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah. That
Yeah.
that and autism get brought up all the time.
hmm
Um, so let's start there. So what is ADHD? How would you give the definition to somebody who doesn't know? What would that look like?
The simplest way that I've ever understood it, the way to break it down is it's a difficulty with inhibition,
Hmm.
right? So it's this idea that a lot of times it's a dopamine deficit. It's complicated too. Like I'm learning there's a lot of different forms of ADD and ADHD. So I think people think of it as the inattentive or hyperactive version. A lot of times people don't get diagnosed with it because they don't see the hyperactive, and people think of hyperactive as the kid that won't sit still. It
Mhm.
doesn't look like that a lot of the time. It can, but it's not. And so the best way I always try to describe it to clients, it's a difficult putting brakes on, right? If dopamine gets induced, you can fixate on something for hours
Mhm.
and you will do it and you won't sleep, you won't eat, you you won't shower. But if it doesn't hit dopamine, your brain does not register it very easily. And then it is hard to slow down those primitive, what you might call limbic system things. So that's the best way that I've kind of like simplified it is it's the inhibition piece of it that's hard.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I remember when I first came back to a place that shall not be named, and you did a training on ADHD,
Uh, yeah,
and anyway. We won't get into that.
yeah,
Let's
that's
talk
a
about it.
separate
Talk about it
podcast.
off camera, um, so that y'all can know what we're talking about. Anyway, there was a train. You were doing a training on ADHD, and that was like my
uh
first step back in the building. Was you doing this training on ADHD, and the way that you kind of broke it down, talking about operating from the occipital region of the brain. And that's why it's like squirrel, like we see, oh, it's over
hmm
there because you're operating from the same part of the brain that is responsible for vision.
hmm
And it's also the same part of the brain that anxiety operates from.
hmm
And so that's why they often mirror each other, and they exacerbate one another. So,
hmm
um, and then the dopamine part I never heard it to put that way of your brain with ADHD, it sucks the dopamine up. That's why most people's brain, neurotypical people's brains, they can last on a boring task for, 20, 30 minutes or longer. Whereas somebody with ADHD, it's all right, what's next? Where do I get this next dopamine hit from?
Right.
And so that was a super interesting. I never heard it put that way before. That's a super interesting way of reframing it and kind of redefining it for me.
Yeah, the funny thing about it for me before you jump into it, Derek, is you spoke to the, it sometimes it manifests as the not being able to sit still part, but not always. And for mine, it started that way as a young child in elementary school, like, kindergarten, first grade, whatever, not being able to sit down, not sitting in my seat, not going to my seat, not staying in my seat. To then once I figured out what the dopamine part of it, like how the dopamine side of things ran, then it was off to the races and everything changed. Then I could keep myself sitting down because I was worried about something else. And I was like, the laser focus on whatever it was I thought I needed to have at that moment. And that the dopamine drive kind of explains the last 47 years of my life. Years of my life is chasing that damn dopamine and doing it. And my wife tells me she has to stop and tell me all the time, like, we gotta stop chasing the dopamine. You gotta sit down. We gotta talk about this. Like, let's focus. Let's redirect, because all you're doing is chasing you're chasing this, and you need to calm down a little bit. So we have to have conversations now, and I'm a little more able to get a hold of it now than I was. But it takes that redirection and reframing to get that way. But it's funny that you mentioned that, because as soon as you started talking about it, I was like, maybe I don't. And the more you talked about it, I was like, yeah, I do. it just kind of reframed itself as time went on. Because when I was young enough, I didn't know the difference. I didn't know to chase the dopamine. I just knew that I couldn't sit down and I needed to be out doing other stuff. And then once I figured out what that was, I was like, yeah, let's do that. I was like, that feels a lot better.
Yeah, Marcus, I'm curious for you, like, hearing that definition. Have you ever heard that before? And if you haven't, what did you think ADHD was, or what was your definition of ADHD?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. When I was third grade, third grade, I went to a counselor at school. I got in trouble all the time at school, like all the time. I had a desk in the corner all the time. Had a desk in the assistant principal's office. That was just my. Every school I went to, like 5 different schools. I was always in that circumstance. But I just remember in third grade, I went and talked to a counselor, and they asked me a bunch of questions. And then they called my mom and told her I had ADD, So I guess in the 90s, they just called it ADD. I don't know. And basically that just made it seem like I told them my mom didn't pay me attention. So it wasn't received very well, because it didn't really come with any level of like therapy support or education. It was just kind of like, here's what we figured out about your kid. This is what we're dealing with. And so it was never dealt with. It was more so I kind of felt a little more like either it was fake or just a little shame attached to it growing up, just because when my mother, got that call, it was like, you need attention, and so that was kind of my thing. I don't need anybody's attention, growing up. It was never about what it was supposed to be about for me. And it actually wasn't. So I'm 41 now, but it wasn't until I was 39 until I like actually accepted it and actually started looking at it. And so the definition of like dopamine and all of that, I've heard it, I've watched videos about it, still trying to understand it a little bit. As far as like well, I guess, yeah, I've heard it. Yeah, it's not new.
So trying to understand it as far as what? We'll finish that thought.
I think that, like, even knowing that, like, knowing when I'm using it to an advantage and when I'm not, when it's working against me and when it's working for me. And my professions have allowed me to run rampant with ADHD, honestly. Like, it's kind of like, but it's got to a point now where it's like, all right, you got to get this thing under control, because, there's a lot of people depending on you. And there are people whose livelihoods are attached to, what you're doing. And there's some areas that you need to lock in. There's some balls you can't drop anymore. And that's where it's kind of like, okay, I'm gonna take it more serious. So in these past couple years, I've been more accepting of it, reading more into it, learning more, trying new things. I haven't taken any medication yet. I was trying to book. I actually was booking with a psychiatrist, and the form was so long. I guess my ADHD didn't want to finish it, so I was just like, never mind.
Yeah, this is boring.
First thing, if someone reach out for ADHD, don't send them a long form. I've been sitting on that joint for 2 months. Like, I need to go back to that link and finish that.
He's like, no dopamine to be found here. Next.
Right.
Zero dopamine attached to that document.
I thought this was important, but not that important.
Right. Well, I mean, you think about it though. Like, you make it to your 40s, and you're doing decent for yourself. It's just kind of like, it isn't. I'm not registering it as important as it maybe is, because it's like, well, nothing's broken. But then it's like, when you really sit back and think, it's like, well, some stuff kind of broke,
Mm-hmm.
some things kind of, but I don't like to focus on those type of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Scott, I don't know if you could speak to that, but the idea that something's broken, to me, again, that training was super enlightening for me, because it's not that something's broken. Mm-hmm. It's that your brain is just operating differently.
Well, I like what Marcus said, because what I try to tell clients is the things that make you good get you in trouble in other parts, right? Like, I'm an obsessive compulsive person, and it helps me do my job. It is not fun on the weekends, right? Like, I have a hard time relaxing. I have a hard time playing, having fun, because everything's about next thing up, right? Mm-hmm. And I think for the longest time, I looked at that as a broken concept. And I think the thing I hate as a provider is thinking in those ways with people, because it's not true. It's not pathology. Mm-hmm. Like, ADHD is really valuable in a lot of ways. Like, that type of brain is creative. And once it gets locked onto something, it can create all new worlds for things. Mm-hmm. Right. But the problem is, though, as Marcus kind of like alluded to, there are times, particularly if you think about a kid sitting in school 8 hours a day, which we could talk all day long about whether that's even healthy for kids. Mm. Right. And trying to contain them in general, let alone with an ADHD brain. Right. Mm-hmm. It's impossible. Right. And then you can't measure someone's intelligence necessarily. Right. Like, what I see all the time is people with ADHD, their IQ scores are quite good. Mm-hmm. It's the stuff, though, like, if it does not get them induced any type of dopamine, they are not performing up to what their capacity is. And then people think they're not keeping up, that they're not very intelligent, they're falling behind. And it's lazy. Simply, they're lazy, and you're not teaching in their style. Right. And you're not getting them in their dopamine kicked in, and it's not broken at all. Like, the thing I love about psychology is everybody's brain's different. Even people with ADHD, it looks very different from person to person. And so I hate the idea of pathology. I always tell people in my reports, I have to diagnose you because it's part of the job, but it's the least important part of my report. Mm-hmm. Try not to focus on that part. Focus on the story. Right.
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned it that way, because I am, I'll turn 50 in February. So in the 80s, Marcus started talking to the 90s when they talk about what in the 80s. Yeah, you were nuts. That's what's wrong. That was what's wrong with you. Sit your ass down. You don't need a Kleenex. You don't need to go to the bathroom. Sit down in your chair. You don't need to be standing up. Mm-hmm. Like, they didn't know or care about any of that shit. There was none of that. So it was very hard for me in that way, because they didn't quite label me stupid. They just labeled me a problem, because I was a problem child, because my brother before me was a problem child. So I was just like my brother. I was never given a chance. I was held back in the first grade because they said they knew it was going to be bad if I went on. I was like, huh? I had all the grades to pass, and they were like, even if you have all the grades, we're not going to pass you because you're not emotionally ready. And I was like, how the hell are you going to tell me I'm not, because I won't sit down? And they were just like, yeah, no, you're fine. You're just going to do this again. You're just going to run it back. And I'm like, and my parents tried to fight it, but they were just like, no, I mean, you can change school districts, but we're not passing him here. Like, this is not how this is. So
let's add a layer of shame on top of it.
Exactly.
Too, right?
And so and that's my thing. Cause I was like, cause I'm talking to my mom, like, did I not do something right? Did I do my grade? Cause I had my report card, and I'm like, bro, like, well, what's with this? And they were just like, yeah, no. And I'm like, so this doesn't matter anymore? Because that's what, in my mind, that's where I took it. Because I was like, oh, well, if we're not going to go by this, then I don't need to go by this for the rest of the time I'm in school. Because if it doesn't matter today, it's not going to matter tomorrow. So I can do bad in school and pass if I can do good in school and not pass. And, like you say, to speak to that layer of shame, when I added that layer of just kind of my own thought process onto it, I was just like, well, this is all a scam then. And that's kind of what I took with me moving forward, because I just didn't understand how you could do that to somebody, like how that could still happen and the whole school get together and be like, yeah, we're not passing him no matter what. And I'm just like, oh, well, okay. So there is something wrong with me. Got it.
Yeah, I remember I was born I was a July baby, so I was already young. In my class, I was always the youngest, and then add on ADHD on top of that. It was nothing but being in trouble, having a desk over in the corner, having to sit in the front, can never sit in the back of the classroom. With the cool kids, I had to be in the front, or I had to go to a different classroom. It was all about that. And then it was like, emotional immaturity, because he's young. So it's emotional immaturity. He can't sit still. It's his age. He just doesn't want to. And it's like, and then it was like, here, do a planner, have a planner. And I'm like, what? Like, that planner lasts a week and then I'm done with the planner. Like,
bro, I lost every planner.
Every planner, bro. Every planner. And then my mom would be like, we'll get you a banana split at the end of the week if you do it. And after like 2 weeks, then I'm like, I like banana splits, but F this. Like, I'm not doing this planner. Like, and then figure out how to manipulate to get my banana split anyway. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that's one of the hardest. Go ahead.
That's a really good example, Derek, of like, you figured out how to get the banana split without following the plan, right? So clearly, like, your brain's working. It's navigating things, but it's finding a creative dopamine-induced way to get there instead of just follow this particular way. I mean, that's a great example. It's not like all of a sudden your brain just shut off. You just went, well, let's find a different way.
Well, and that's the best, like, when you
more dopamine.
When you talked about school and how, like, the learning and all that, like the fact that they're now coming up with different modalities for people to be able to learn, like when you start hearing about the read, the write, all those types, kinetic learning and all that stuff, it's good that they're starting to actually pay attention to that now. Because sitting in, like you said, I mean, it is not beneficial to anyone to sit for 8 hours a day and be fed what they're fed in public schools today. It's just not, because, like, you can't, there's not one point in any of what we were taught in school where we were fighting back against that system saying, hey, when am I ever going to learn? When am I ever going to need this in the future? Oh, you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket forever. Oh, but yeah, now we are. So what's up? And then it's like, oh, I don't need to know any, like 90% of the shit that we learned in there, we didn't need to know. So the fact that they're starting to actually realize that and switch things up and switch modalities of learning and kind of starting to, I don't want to say cater, but they're starting to kind of adjust things to help people that are, that it's harder for to pay attention in those amounts of time. So it's actually, I think it's better that way. Luckily, I don't have a child in school today because I don't know that I could handle it the way things have broken down today. But, it's good at least that they're making strides to change some of that stuff.
How do y'all see that the way that you were treated in school growing up and being labeled with ADHD, that shame that we're uncovering the shame, the kind of way they used to shame punish you, right? And shame trying to get you in line and use shame to do this. I guess I get curious how that showed up as you got older in your relationships and your work and being a leader and things like that. Because I don't think it was until, I had to be a grad program or a little bit after that, actually, that I realized a lot of what I was doing was trying to fight against this thing that I couldn't fight. Like the way that it was. And so I remember sitting in rooms with people in my brain. There was something that you said, Scott, again in that training where it was like the working memory. It only lasts so long. And so it'll like just empty out real fast. And I never knew that before. My brain just, but I'd be in the room with somebody and my brain would do that. And then I would try not to show that it did that. And so, but then that caused more anxiety because what if they see that it did that? And what if that made them think that I didn't really care about what they were saying? And so then it caused even more, right? And so there was these ways that I felt that going into the room and finally got to a place where I just had to make friends with it, where I had to make friends with my brain and what it does and how it responds, because there's nothing I'm going to do to fight it. But I'm recognizing how much that shame followed me throughout my adult life and my relationship with my wife and my kids and work and things like that, not completing tasks, stuff like that. So I'm curious how maybe some other stories of how that shame may have followed you all into adulthood, into your relationships.
Yeah, it showed up. It's shown up a lot of ways. I think that in the grand scheme of it, I spent a lot of my life apologizing for something I didn't realize I was doing. Um,
Mhm.
and it is just kind of like, oh man, yeah, and it's kind of like that. Like I didn't realize, I didn't
Mhm.
realize I dropped that ball. And it, one thing I will say is that I think for my marriage, if it was taken seriously when I was a child, then I would have went into my marriage explaining to my wife how I process instead of forgetting to do the dishes and us having to go to marriage counseling, because I didn't help around the house in the way she needed me to. But, there were things I would see around the house that I thought was important, so it's just like, what are you in the backyard doing? And it's like, I bought a chainsaw. And I'm like, I'm learning how to cut a tree. And it's just like, I just need you to sort your socks. Like, like, why won't you just do your socks? And
Mhm.
it's just like, um, so feeling a lot of just in that field, I think that as I got older, um, every environment, I would just basically default to whatever people, there was a series where people were like, you're the hyper, you're hyper, and that was the word everyone used, you're hyper. You just, you got a lot of energy.
Mhm.
Um, then it was kind of like you talk a lot, you talk too much,
Mhm.
this guy, once I get excited about something, I can go forever. And it just continued to show up in ways to where like in relationships, the way that I would, uh, not, I don't want the subject to change too much, but just kind of the way I'd mull over like how interactions went, so like leaving an event and being like, man, I talked the entire event, like crap, they might not ever want to hang, then I feel a little embarrassed, because
Mhm.
I'm just like, why didn't I stop? It just kind of those moments. So like socially, so then if that person doesn't call me, then I'm dealing with rejection sensitivity, which is another thing I've learned about that I wish I knew about 10 years ago, honestly.
Mhm.
Like that I don't, I haven't responded well to like criticism or just the feeling of being rejected, but it all ties in together, where I feel like some just continually being in an apologetic state of I probably did drop it. I probably did forget. At this point, someone could just walk up to me and be like, "You forgot," and I just would accept it. And if I don't know what they're talking about, I'm like, "That's probably just because I forget a lot of stuff." But I don't forget a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
I just forget some of other people's stuff. I guess I don't know. I don't know how my brain decides what to put in the trash and what to hold on to. But it's hella frustrating because you're just like, why didn't you remember that? I needed that
Mhm. That thing.
one.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny that Marcus was talking about that because just this weekend, so we had our floors redone in the house, and while we're trying to move everything back in the house, my wife had a whole plan. Who she's also ADHD, so she will get to doing stuff, and 5 minutes later she's somewhere completely different, doing something completely that wasn't on the plan on the list. Because one thing led to another thing, led to another thing, and she's down this rabbit hole of things. And she had a clear plan that she was half-ass sticking to for once. And she was moving stuff, and she asked me to help her do stuff. And so I'm like, yeah, cool. And as I'm walking to the front, there's this I had to pick up and move and change over here. Then I had to go outside and take some trash out. As I was doing to take the trash out, I saw something on the porch that I thought I should go back inside. And I'm opening the door trying to bring it back inside. She's like, what do you do? I was like, oh, I'm bringing this in here. She was like, no, we're out here doing this stuff. And I'm like, but this needs to, she's like, that doesn't need to come in right now. She's like, there's really not even any place to put it if you brought it inside. I was like, yeah, but it's on the, I don't know. And she's just like, no, come out here in the garage. I need you to help me. I was like, fine. So I was like, we had to completely adjust and shift and switch. But the shame behind how it was brought to my attention from what I had, dealt with forever it always manifests in the way of when I, like Margaret said, if I drop the ball, if I forget something, if I was going to do something and just didn't make it all the way or didn't do so, it hits hard because I realize that for me, in kind of the way that I have processed it is I let it win. I let it beat me in that instance because I've worked very, very hard, as I was telling you guys before we jumped on camera. Like I've worked very, very hard to adjust how my brain works and how I can turn it on and off and how I can focus more on stuff when I know it's starting to creep in, unmedicated, which I don't recommend, because it doesn't always work, as we can tell. But it really comes back into like, oh shit, we let it win this time. It won again. It did this, or I should have followed through with that. I'm old enough now. I could do it. I should be able to do it with no problems, because it was always the immaturity part. Well, I'm mature now. I'm better. I'm more now. I've come far enough now. I should be able to learn how to do this without having to take medication. I shouldn't be dropping these balls. I shouldn't be so it impacts pretty much everything. And probably the only benefit to the marriage side of things for me is the fact that she also has, the same, we kind of suffer the same way. So she understands it more. So I can just look at her and be like, oh, well, I got sidetracked doing this or that or this. She knows it's not malicious. She knows there was no intention behind me just not doing it. It's just the fact that I got onto something else and just kind of squirrel moment and went over and saw something bright and shiny and took off so it helps that way, but we both kind of help try to keep each other in check when it comes to stuff like that. If it's something super important, if it's not, we just kind of laugh it off and, squirrel moment and just keep it moving. But it just really helps to have somebody that understands in such a way that it doesn't come off as a big argument, because she knows it, or she and I both know that nothing was done intentionally.
That's funny you say that. That's where you got lucky, is she have it too, because my wife is like, she's more OCD and she's a therapist and she's like a military veteran, and so the bed being made is important,
Right.
like my side of the sink, there was a point where she's just like, don't touch my side of the sink. And I'm like, all the makeup and stuff you got, no one cares, it is just like, because I brush my hair and then I set my brush on her side. And it's just like, why is your brush over here? And yeah, it has caused a lot of problems. I've been married 18 years, but there's been periods in that marriage where it's just like, this don't even make sense or work. So what are we doing? I am apologizing to you all the time. She's apologizing to me all the time. And that's just an area where when we talk about just kind of like on the shame thing, it's like, well, you said you'd do something and you didn't do it.
Right.
And her expectation of it is that it happens, but not only that, she'll do it.
Right.
And if I forgot about it, I didn't notice you did it yourself because I didn't do it, which
Right.
makes me look even more like a jerk, right? Because
Right.
it's like, he didn't take the trash out, I'll do it. So I'm just watching her take trash out. I'm like, oh, thanks, babe.
I'm sure that goes over really well.
Yeah, it is just like, and I'm like, why aren't you talking to me? What did I do? And it's like, I asked you to do it, and then I did it, and you didn't even try to help. And I'm just like, I forgot that. I mean, it kind of slipped my mind. I mean, I remember now that we're talking about it.
Right.
I would have loved the nudge, and that was the thing that kind of crept in our marriage too. Was like, I would ask for like, hey, if you give me a reminder, or help me with a list. Well, that would frustrate her, because she's like, well, you're not a kid,
Right.
And I'm just like, I'm not. I know I'm not a kid. I'm just trying to tell you the best. This is how you get the best results. And it's like, but at the same time, you don't want to be an extra kid in the house, in the same sense. So yeah.
Scott, what's your thought?
Well, the couple of things stood out to me is intention was a word that stood out to me. Is like, I think a lot of times what I'm dealing with is that folks assume intention in people's behaviors. And I'm like, well, the reason people do things is very complicated. There's a lot of things going on in the brain. There's a lot of unconscious processes happening. And a lot of those things are outside of our immediate awareness. Right. And so we ascribe intention to the things, and then we start telling ourselves a story. Like I listened to everybody talking about kind of the narration they're given to their issues. Right. Like, well, I did this and this meant that. And I think the problem becomes then is you create, Derek, you were kind of essentially saying it. I create an anxiety loop, which then makes the working memory 10 times worse.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the story I'm telling myself, right? That I'm broken, something's wrong. Look at all the messes that I'm making. And we're missing the big picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
I always talk to clients about having orange sunglasses on, right? If I have orange sunglasses on, everything's orange. But if I take them out and put them a few feet in front of my face, I still see the orange, but then I see all the other colors too,
Mm-hmm.
right? And a lot of times we're just sitting there looking at one particular color and going, well, this is a mess. And it's like, well, it has its downside, but we're missing all the other things we're bringing to the table too. So it's the stories we tell ourselves also that's the problem, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. There was a thought that I had earlier that with my wife and I, where I would think I would have a conversation with her about something, but I really didn't. And I'd be like, I told you about that. She's like, no, you didn't, babe. That was your other girlfriend. Right. Like, man, because I have it in my mind again to talk to her about whatever it might be, or tell her that this thing is coming up, or tell her I got, whatever. And then it's like, all right, at least I thought about it. And my brain's like, all right, check, and then later on, it's like the day before, the day of. And I'm like, we got that thing today. And she's like, what thing? I'm like, I told you about it. No, you didn't. You know what I mean? But that's a way that, talking about the trash and stuff like that's showed up in my relationship. And there got to a point where I think I was blessed. I was blessed in this aspect, I think, of where my wife just accepted the things about me. And like my shoes, I talk to my clients, and I'll kind of give this as an example with people with ADHD. I'm like I have my spot in the living room, and I come home and I'll take my shoes off, and I might wear the same shoes the next day, but I might not, because I'm a sneakerhead, so I got multiple shoes. Well, by Friday I might have 3-4 pairs of shoes on that in that spot by the couch. And we could fight about the shoes being in the spot by the couch, which there was a little bit of that early on. And she was taking it as like, I didn't care. She was, you just leaving your shoes there because you want me to pick them up. And so we kind of talked about it, and there did get to a place where, yes, I tried to make an intent to pick my shoes up. And I also have ADHD, and so my mind is just going to something else and do something else. My wife had to change how she took that, how she interpreted that, to where she recognizes that the shoes aren't that important to me, and I'm not doing that to have her pick them up. And that if she leaves them there, I'll get to them, and nobody's coming over anyway. So what does it really matter, right? But she'll leave them there, and then I'll get to them when I get to them. And now I may have 3-4 pairs of shoes, but at that point I'm like, I got to get these picked up. Right. And so there's ways that we've had to adjust in our relationship, that there was conflict there, and she was interpreting it a certain way. But the more we learned each other, the more that we accepted each other, the more she was able to kind of let go of that. So being such a personal thing, and accept me for what it is, and that it's not something I'm doing. It's more so just the way my brain works, and that those shoes aren't that important to me.
Well,
Even though they take up half the living room, because
I was
we're
going
an
to
18.
say, let's explain why that's a problem, because your wife is 5'1" on a good day, standing on a hill, and could fall inside of your shoe and be lost because you wear size 18. So three pairs of size 18.
Big shoe.
Right. So 3 sets of battleships on the ground for a little tiny person is a lot, sir.
It is the living room.
You could lose a toddler in there. So let's talk about why it's a real problem.
whatever. But I think that there is a way that there was a quote I heard one time that said, I don't know who said it, but it said, it's a fallacy to believe that changing your spouse is the only way to lead to a happy marriage, when in fact acceptance is the only context in which change can be requested. And there was a way that really plays a part in my relationship, is my wife just accepting there are things that I'm going to do and things that I'm not going to do, unless I'm reminded multiple times. And that's not a personal thing. She accepts my brain for having ideas. Bro, my wife calls them my Life Scout badges, right? All the things that I've done in my life, from selling cologne, being a massage therapist, having a clothing line, being a music manager, doing, like there's so many Life Scout badges of things that I'm like, this is what I want to do for my Photoshop. Like, yeah, as Cadence, there was one time I was healing up from knee surgery and I got into Photoshop heavy. And was doing some cool logos type stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, like it's just she calls them my Life Scout badges because my brain it'll go and it'll learn and it'll come. Okay, what's next? Go and learn, and what's next? Go and learn. And she's like, "All right, babe, whatever."
Those side quest badges are tough, boy. You can get down on
It's
side quest.
crazy.
My wife,
Yeah,
boy, she's
it's
put up
crazy.
with so much shit out of me over the years. She's just like, we're on this now. I'm like, yeah, we're on this now. Like, it just so many ideas over the years.
It's chaotic, and it's funny because Derek, I don't know if you see this, but like the scary part is when it works. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you take on a side quest and then it's like successful, and you still want to step away from it and do something else. And it's just like, yeah, I'm not really feeling it anymore. And you ready for the next thing. And I mean, just like even what I'm doing, what I do now is like if it didn't have purpose attached to it, I'm over it. You know what I mean? Like I'm over it. You know what I'm saying? But the fact that I get to meet like a new young person almost every 2 days, I get to have like new circumstances. So it's constantly evolving as in the work. It keeps me engaged. You know what I mean? But like outside of that, I'm over it. Like the meetings, the financial meetings, the just all the things attached. To me, I use a term with my team called laundry. And basically, it's my way of helping them understand how my mind works. And what I explain to them is, for me, details are like laundry that isn't sorted. So show me my pile of laundry that I need to look at, and I'll get it. So like something my wife started doing is putting my laundry away from everyone else's, and then she'll put it on the bed, like at the foot of the bed, and I'll put it up every time. Like I'll come in, I'll look, it's mine. I know where everything right there goes. But once I have to start thinking about whose is this, we won't even get into women's clothing and how complicated they are. I don't even know what it is.
Bro, they don't understand. They don't understand. When you talk to women about it, they're like, I don't get it. I'm like, I can't hang up lady clothes because it's weird ass fabrics. They got 17 different neck holes. Like, nah.
Yeah, I don't
get it. I can hang up a hoodie and a t-shirt.
I don't know.
Yeah, I can hang up a hoodie, a t-shirt, a polo, the end. Past that, don't give me no weird scoop neck shit that I have to have a velvet hanger for. And no, I can't do it.
I can do it all day, but you know what? Like when I'm at work and they start like piling on, I'll stop and I say, wait, this feels like a pile of laundry. And they know it. So I'm like, what problem do I need to solve right now? For you, because everything you're saying, it just feels like a pile of laundry, and my brain doesn't want to deal with a pile of laundry. So show me the pile, like sort it out for me so that I can be the best leader I can for you. And they've been graceful enough to like understand that and hear that. But I mean, I'm the boss, so they have to. But at the same time, they can come. But it is one of those things where that's the best way I can explain, kind of like the shoes, but like laundry. And that was one of the ways I was able to even help my wife kind of understand that like piles of laundry frustrate me. But if my stuff is pulled to the side and I know what I need to do, I can focus on one thing at a time, but not a mountain of things at a time.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the meeting thing because I have another side quest that I do for the bariatric community, and I'm a co-founder of a whole nonprofit, all this stuff, and they'll want to do all these like leadership meetings, and I'm like, can I just email me the bridge, like the Cliffs Notes, because I can't, like, I don't want to sit through all this bullshit. Like I know like what's happening. I have a gist, like an overall view of what's happening. So just email me that. Like I sitting there through all, like I don't listen to 99% of it because it's just not. I can't lock into it like that because I'm like, that's not, like you said, the pile of laundry, like that's not my department. I don't even know. Like, I know how it works. I trust you to do it. That's why you're here. If I didn't trust you to do what you were supposed to do, I wouldn't have you there. I'd replace you with somebody else. Mm-hmm. So I know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Give me the abridged version in the email so I know what we're hitting and where we need to hit, and I'll go from there. Like, because I just can't. It just doesn't work that way to sit through meetings like that and just they'll want to sit through 7-hour meeting. Like, oh, we got 4 meetings today, and I'm like, y'all have 4 meetings today. I was like, I got it.
So that means you probably deal with and Derek, you too, kind of like what was the question? The moments, because it's just like you like the 30-second, 2-minute, the 1-minute questions. I cannot.
Well, and by the time they get done talking about their stuff, I'm like, what did we even start talking about? Like, when we started this whole shit, what was it like?
What was the question?
I'm just like,
wait, what was the question? I'm sorry.
It's the what?
I promise I care.
You're right. I'm like, I can't even say I'm locked in. I can't, like, the level of care is there, but I just need to know the end result. Like, give me the Z without going through anything. Like, I need to get to the end.
My brain doesn't want B through.
No. Give me we need the shortcut.
That's fascinating, because I think I've been able to utilize my ADHD in the room with people to, like, go different directions and catch things that maybe they don't think about or they don't think are important, but my brain catches it. And then, like, in listening, because I'm not solely focused on one thing, and listening, I catch something else, and we'll, like, just dig in, and I've been able to kind of capture it and use that to my advantage, I think, at times. But then, it's like you forget something that's important, that's, like, really emotional, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's right, your mom did die last year, and I forgot that today was the anniversary, and I just asked how your mom was doing. Like,
but Derek, you've seen that work for me to my advantage at retreat. Like, when I'm talking, like, I'll be glad-handed talking to people, and I'll talk to 30, 45 people in a span of 30, 45 minutes. But the connection is real, and it's because it's next. I can do that, and I can connect with people in such a way that they understand. They feel like because it is a meaningful conversation. It's a meaningful connection, because that's how I intend it to be. But it helps me stay connected because it's a short-term situation. Some of them are a little bit longer, so maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And I can remember those types of things when I'm talking to those people again and again that I've talked to. But it has to be like, if somebody tries to draw my attention in and there's a room full of all these other people like that, no, it's not going to work on a long-term situation. Like, we're not going to talk for 15 minutes and you tell me something that I said on a episode of a podcast, a year and a half ago. I'm going to be like, cool, I'm glad that resonated with you. And then I'm going to walk off and be like, I said that shit? Like, cool. All right, man, whatever. Like, but that's the hardest part about it. Like, I'm glad that clips and stuff like this live on, because I'd be like, oh yeah, I guess I did. I sound pretty smart sometimes. Like, that's wild.
Bro, that's the worst when you say something, when I say something in the room and kind of like, I don't know, and they're like, say that again for me. And I'm like, I don't know what I just said. Like,
damn it.
You're like, I would love to.
I'm so sorry.
I give you a version of it, but it would be the same one. It's not going to be verbatim.
Yeah, so the 2 therapists in here, right, are 3.
2, me and Scott, yeah. Well, Scott's a clinical psychologist. Let me give him his props, because he's above me.
So my question, when I think about therapy, like, because I have a therapist, and sometimes it feels like he'll ask one question and then it's over. Like, and then it's like, all right, that's our time. Then I'm like, wait, did I do therapy? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I keep trying to figure out if I'm doing therapy right, because he's just like, what's new? And I'm like, well, remember last week when I told you, I'm like, and that's done. And it's like, yeah. And he's just like, he's like, well, all right, let's get our next thing on the calendar. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, we're doing some other stuff. We're doing a little IFS. We're doing some different things, but it's definitely, some of those sessions feel like I'm like, I don't know if I'm doing therapy right sometimes.
It feels like a data dump. Like, you're just data dumping. You're just like, let me just download real quick. And
then I'm just like, whew, all right, let's get back to the madness, But I can't. I left therapy a couple of years ago because of that, because I didn't feel like I was doing it right, or that that I really understood how to have therapy. Or experience therapy. So I'm for an ADHDer, like, what from a therapist perspective, like these sessions, like how do we get the most out of it?
I'm gonna let you take
Do you
that
want to
one.
take that? You want
No,
me
you
to take
got
it?
it. Yeah, take it. And
Okay.
I'll follow up.
Well,
Yeah.
Derek, tell me, because I'll build off of this, because like one of the researchers I really like talks about right hemisphere, right brain psychotherapy, Alan Shore. And he's essentially talking about that, like when you go into therapy, you're borrowing your therapist's brain, right? So you're dysregulated, you're telling stories, and clients tell me this stuff all the time. They're saying a bunch of things, and they're like, I'm all over the place today. It doesn't make any sense. And if I'm really paying attention, it all makes sense, right? Like, and now again, it requires a lot on my end as the therapist to really focus on not just what they're saying, but not like the words, but what are they actually saying, right? It's not the content necessarily, right? It's the story underneath the story, right? And so essentially what I would say is happening, and I think probably what can feel overwhelming for ADHD folks is already feeling adrift in your own thoughts. And the therapist's job, I think, and sometimes is to provide some measure of frontal lobe scaffolding, right hemisphere processing, right? To feel held, right? Like to feel like that, like you are tracking and you're helping them track as well. Because otherwise, I think what you're describing is feeling adrift sometimes, right? And for ADHD folks, I think that's a very like real risk because of the way their brains operate. And I think the funny thing is probably everything you're saying in session is connecting and making sense. You just need help noticing it, right? And Derek, I don't know if you want to build off of that or.
Yeah, I think the first thing that came to my mind is, do you find that helpful? Like, do you find that time and space with your therapist and kind of that the way it's going? And at the end of it, what I heard you say was like, all right, let's get back to the like that you feel kind of like emptied out, right? Do you find that beneficial in this where you're at right now?
I do feel like sometimes talking about things, especially when you're like a leader in multiple aspects, family, work, and different things like that, that you just can't really just always say. Saying it and just getting it said sometimes does help. To just kind of like get it all out. Like, how do I really feel about this? I was thinking about it and I didn't like this. And he may just say, why didn't you like it? And then that's another rabbit hole, because then I'm just like, well, I never liked this, then there's another rabbit hole on top of that and then we've taken all these trails, almost like the multiverse, and every fracture creates another like dimension of storyline that we're like going into. But I've been able to, I feel, unpack or like get a better understanding of some things. Even like some of the stuff I shared when we first started, I discovered talking in therapy, and just talking about like, well, school was like this for me, and I've always been in trouble. And it's like, well, did you want to be in trouble? No, I didn't even know I was doing anything wrong half the time. It was always, and just like coming to those realizations have been helpful. And I guess the thought that like I said, what I kind of bounce off of is just kind of like, is that what it's supposed to be, or is it supposed to be more, in a sense? Or let me. So I deal with. So I have some anxiety, trauma, PTSD, and then the ADHD, all that combined. I honestly feel like if you live in America, you probably have two or three of those. And swap out ADHD with something else, but
Right.
but I'm probably wrong about that too, but
You're good.
I don't know.
All
It's
right.
all I know, So
Yeah.
it's just kind of like everybody I know has trauma, And so sometimes I wonder, like, okay, did my ADHD disrupt me to deal with my trauma? Disrupt that, or getting to that, whether it's like sexual trauma or parent stuff or family stuff, like we're talking through it, but I'm going in so many loops. It's like, did we get to it? So I'm just like, yeah, we talked about a lot and that was good. Like it felt good to like talk, but I don't know if we're dealing with all my crap. It's just the ADHD like takes over. He's like the elephant in the room sometimes.
Well, a lot of times when you do that and you take a session and you feel like you've talked through the whole session, and then when it's time to wrap up and they're like, all right, well, let's get something to count. You don't fit. Like, I think a lot of times when you're wondering if you're even doing therapy right, it's because you're not getting there's no time to really get anything back. There's no time to kind of unpack what you've tossed out there. You just put it out there and been like, okay, well, here it is. That's why I was using it kind of just to describe as a data dump, because you had a place to put everything you've been holding for that week or 2 weeks or however long it is, but there's no deconstructing it coming back your way. It's not a conversational situation. It's you just being like, well, here's what it is. And they're like, okay, well, we'll see you next week and we'll talk more about it. And you're just like, well, shit.
Yeah.
I think
I used to laugh because he'd say like, just how you doing?
Mhm.
And I laugh a little bit because I'm like, you ready for this? You know, like,
You really want to know?
that's it. You want to start when we left off, or you want to know how I feel today? Because we need a session for the session.
Right. Well, I think that there's a few things that hit my mind in this. Is one is coming back to kind of the shame that's probably been there. Like even the thought of, am I doing therapy right? And in the shame that seems attached to that at some level of even thinking like, I'm not doing this okay. Like, am I like comparing yourself or like trying to correct something? Like, again, that feels ADHD related in the sense of how we experience things growing up as kids, always being redirected, corrected, compared, right? Am I doing this thing right? It becomes an innate organizing principle at that point to question yourself because you're always being corrected, redirected, or compared, right? And so that would be a question maybe to sit with and ponder on. The other thing that came to my mind to kind of piggyback off of what Scott was saying is, for me, therapy is a relationship first. And do you feel like you're building a relationship with the person across from you? And do you feel judged? Do you feel shame? Do you feel validated? How do you feel sitting in the room with this person? And if there's something that doesn't feel right, doesn't feel connecting, if the relationship doesn't feel like it's building, then there's probably need to be a conversation about that. Like even in a way that you just said of like, bringing that up of like, hey, there's sometimes that I come in here and it's like, how are you doing? And then it's like, it seems like 2 minutes later, you're like, okay, let's get something on the books. And I don't know, there's something that just feels off about that to me. And I want to talk about it. Right. So bringing that up with him. But again, to piggyback off of what Scott said, it is like, for me, it is making sense together. Like my job as a therapist, isn't to fix you. It's not to change you. It's not to, do anything but help you make sense of your world. What is happening in your world, and walking along with you and taking that journey with you and trying to help you make sense of how you're experiencing things around you. And then if you want something to change, then we talk about whatever it is that you want to change. Right. But if you don't want it to change, then there's nothing for me. It's not my life. I'm not the expert on you. Right. And so definitely multiple times where it's like people come in and blah, and they borrow my brain for a minute, and which is a scary thing sometimes. Right. But they borrow my brain and we just make sense together of what they're experiencing. And that may just be man, I don't know if you remember my CCI at all or not, but there was a kid that I met with in my grad program as an intern that we just spent sessions talking about his snake collection. And that was it. Like he was talking to me about the different types of snakes and this color snake and how this snake was rare and this one. And there would be times when we just spent times that he was just talking about his snake collection.
Wow.
But the importance of that was that somebody listened to him about his snake collection.
Right.
And he felt heard and felt the relationship and felt important and felt validated and felt like somebody was interested in him. And that meant more in that moment than anything of me needing to change something or do something. And it was through that then we started identifying the feelings about dad and getting into the trauma about dad and things like that. And so I think, as speaking from a therapist perspective, I think that I don't look at there being, well, I do. I mean, I was gonna say, I don't look at there being a wrong way to do therapy, but Scott, like, yeah, you do.
I can give you some examples if you want.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, you do. If you as the client, I think I don't look at the client as doing therapy wrong. I think
so. Let's, if you don't mind, I'll piggyback off that then real quick, because I think it ties in something you said earlier about relationships with your wife. as an example. Because I think you're right. Like, two things. Number one, you have to be in a relationship, whether it be therapeutic or your marriage or whatever it is, where this person's got your back, right? And you believe that. They are on your team. They maybe don't always agree with all the things that you do. You frustrate the dog out of them sometimes, but they 100% are on your team, and they understand you, right?
Right.
And they work to understand you, and they help you ask better questions. I think this happened to me last night with my wife. My wife is my biggest cheerleader, like, and I don't mean that in some sexist type of way. I just mean that, like, we are both that for each other,
Right.
right? Like, I think she's the best. She thinks I am as well. And I've been in a funk, and she asked me, I was asking Marcus the same question. Am I doing my life right? I've had a hard year. Like, there's been a lot that's happened, and I'm asking myself these questions of, like, what am I missing? Am I getting it right? And she said, Scott, you're asking yourself the wrong question. You need to ask a different question. What do I want my life to look like? Ask that question, right? And the only reason that I bought that, right? Because she's essentially saying, believe in yourself, believe in who you are, believe in what you've done, believe in what your purpose is, right? And the only reason I bought it from her is because I bought that she cared about me, right? I think that goes back to what Derek said about his marriage. I think it's what he's saying about therapy, right? It's like, you got to believe and know in the heart of your soul that this person's on your team. And then they help you ask better questions, right? Because a lot of the questions that we're talking about related to ADHD, or really anything mental health, come down to these very negative things, right? These deficit mindsets. And the thing I love about therapy and psychological assessment is helping people see themselves differently, right? And it's so powerful when you can start to pivot, but you're not going to take that story from someone who you don't buy into.
Right. And I think that's that always come back to that, right? Like, and that should be brought up in the room. If there is something there, bring it up with that therapist. Like, if you're needing something else, or just curious about, even saying needing, like, I just, like, be curious about, this is what I'm experiencing, and there's a shame attached to it too. I'm wondering if I'm doing this right. Like, there should be a mutual intersubjective play that happens with that, to understand your experience better.
Yeah. Well, my therapist, he's actually been great. And I was I was kind of like concerned for him, like,
Like, bro, you
does he
good?
feel like he's doing a good job?
Mhm.
Like, because I'm just like, but I will say, like, he's my third attempt at therapy, and over the past 5 years. But I can already see a big difference in just like his approach, and he jumped in IFS like pretty quick. I mean, he kind of like, we had 2 sessions, and he's like, "Have you ever heard of IFS?" And I'm like, I've heard of it, and all of that. And then I think within like 1 session, like, we identified one of my protectors, that have stepped in and tried to, and it's just like, man, like, okay, I see it, and he did that within like 10 minutes, that's around me talking in the session. He probably had about 10 minutes to really pull that out, and then just said, think about it. And I've been thinking about it all week, until our next session. It's been on my mind, and I've been really processing it, talking to my wife about it, and all of that. But in a sense, I guess that sensitivity to how people either perceive you or accept you, um, that's always there, and even though I'm getting a little older, into like kind of like more of the I don't care what people think phase of life, there's still a little nag in the back of my mind of like, that probably made them upset, or that probably don't push them away, or don't do, those feelings. And it's like, that was something I literally this year realized. I think my wife showed it to me. It was like, have you ever heard of this? And it was RSD, rejection sensitivity disorder. And I was like reading about it. She sent it to me in a link. It was just like, I just came across this, and I was reading about it. I was like, man, like, I think I've taken a lot of things the wrong way just because a person didn't like respond the way I felt like they should have, or they didn't um call me or send me it just invite me to something, like, there's something I held against friends that just like did something and didn't invite me to it, and I'm just like, why didn't y'all invite me? I finally asked them, they're just like, you're usually busy. And I'm just like, You don't decide that for me. Still ask. I am busy though, but ask me. You know what I mean? Like, what the heck, man? Everybody was there but me. And I'm like, me trying to process, like, how do I not take that the wrong way, right?
Mm.
But realizing like there's something in the wiring of my brain that where those things stick out to me, you know, and it's like you try not to be I'm in a room full of therapists, crazy about it.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
I mean, even that, and this is my other struggle with is pathologizing lived experience, right? That idea of rejection sensitivity disorder or whatever, to me, just is like, and trying, how do I, like, even the question, how do I not look at it like that? I think is jumping ahead too far. It's one, it's so there is, again, from a therapist perspective, I think therapists can do bad therapy. When you pathologize lived experience, there's some reason why rejection means so much to you. And what is that reason? How can we dig in and be curious about that instead of calling it a diagnosis? Right. And what is that it's hitting on? What is the wound, the emotional wound that's there from a child as a kid that has now become this thing where rejection is just overly impactful, right? And let's understand that first. Let's try to be curious about that and get to the root of it. And then look at, do I want to keep taking it this way? Or how can I begin to look at things differently than what there was a survival skill in that. I look at it like, you were sensitive to rejection. There was probably some reason for that. And the sensitivity was a survival skill. There was some.
Well, in the sense of, sorry, this,
No, go ahead.
you know, the sensitivity to it is biological. Like it's social pain theory.
That's
like
right.
the part of the brain that registers physical pain registers social pain as well.
Mhm.
So that same part lights up. It feels like getting hit in the stomach.
Right. Right. And some
So it's
people
not-
ignore it. Some people are more sensitive to it.
Right. Well, and if going back to the ADHD part, right? Like if you have trouble with inhibition, which essentially means you have trouble regulating kind of the emotion centers of the brain, when you get that gut punch, that relational gut punch, you have a hard time then kind of looking at the big picture, right? And zooming out and going, well, did they mean it that way? Or it just feels that way and therefore it is. Right.
Right. And so that's why I have an issue with pathologizing, because one, yes, bringing it back to ADHD, the way that our brain works is that spike of emotion, right? We experience things really extremely, really heavily up front. And so, and it may not even be that big of a thing to experience that level of emotion about, right? But we experience it like that. And so you pathologize that, and it's like, that's not what's happening. I think the goal becomes a goal that should happen is to be able to understand what you're feeling, validate it, and then decide if you want to do anything with it. But if it's like, that's a pathology, I think we started off on the wrong foot, right? And especially with the ADHD brain. And
Well, my son, like
with
my
all the
son
shame
is,
and the guilt we already deal with.
my son is like hyper, like is if there's a checklist of 10 things that make you ADHD, he's got 11 of the 10 things. So he's like, there's a he created a whole different chart. And it's funny to me because now that he's 23, getting older, like some of that stuff is manifesting. Like you realize that when even if he's talking about something that is not a big deal at all, his story time is very important. Like if he doesn't get to monologue and story time and tell you all his shit, if he gets interrupted by anything, it's a whole thing. Like it's a whole reset, like mini meltdown. Like, oh, nobody's going to listen to me, fine, whatever. Like I'll just take my shit and go. Like it is one of those things. You just have to be like, all right, like, hey, calm down. Like life still happens while your story's going on. Sometimes we just got to pause, take care of what's happening, then come right back to the story. It's not a big deal. Like but since I had to deal with the shame and the struggle of all this from being, from when I was young, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't the same for him growing up. And so the one thing that I can remember that really like still shakes me to this day is I was one of those people that was just adamant my kid's not going to be on medication. Did I do research to figure out why I didn't want him on medication? Absolutely not. Was I just a detractor from the get-go? Absolutely. I was just like, no, man, woo! Like, he's not going to be a med kid. And he's, he was too young to even be on them to begin with, but I was just like, no meds, no tests, no meds. I don't want to die. It was probably from my same situation. Like, I don't want my shame to rub off on him and him have to deal with the same stuff. Not even correlating the fact that it's, 30 years and 35 years in the future. And people don't treat people the same way that they used to. And we were sitting in the office with the doctor, and they came back and they're like, yeah, he's off the charts. We need to get him on some meds. And the doctor, he looked at me and he wanted me to explain to him what they were talking about for medication. And the doctor's like, listen, he's like, how your brain is really loud and noisy and it's crowded in there. This is, this helps that the medication is going to help that stop and slow down and let you be able to hear, focus, listen, all that stuff. And this kid looks at me and he's like, thank you, Daddy. Like, this is great. And I'm like, aren't you an asshole? Like, great. Here I am, like, no meds. And they're like, and then he's like, this is amazing. And I'm just like, fine, like, oh, I guess. But it's just funny to me, like, how that projected from me, that I tried to project it onto him, but letting go of that projection actually helped him. And now that he's older now and thinking he can just conquer the world without meds. And I'm like, that's not how that works. So we're trying to get him back on medication so he can realize, because he is just actively all over the place with what he wants to do. He's got, like we're talking about, he's got the plans for the side quest for the this and that. And he'll come to me and be like, all right, long-term goal. And I'm like, what are we like? So when I'm like 40 and I'm like, well, you are 23 years old. Do you know how much life you have between now and you're 40? Like, would you put your, like, let's talk about tomorrow. And he's like, yeah, but this. And I'm like, oh, dude, like, come on.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's funny how it shifts and changes from how you deal with it with yourself and trying to get somebody else to grasp, because it's never going to be the same in how you deal with it and how somebody else deals with it. And you can't, like, how I can.
My 8-year-old.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, my 8-year-old, it has combined ADHD, and she is a handful. And we have a 4-year-old who sometimes is just more. And now, see, I don't want to use the word even after this conversation, but like, she appears to be more mature than the 8-year-old.
Right.
But she's brilliant and smart, and talented, and all of those things, but a handful. And it's just like, and me and my wife, we talk, and I'm just like, okay, how long do we let this go on before we, do the thing, because it's just kind of like, we do virtual school with our kids, and things like that, that helps, because she did go to school and we were getting caught, all the time. And I'm just like, well, I don't want her to have the shame I had, sitting in the office all day. That's not helpful. She's not becoming better in the principal's office all day just because she won't sit still. She's not violent. She's not defiant, but just hyperactive and bored easily. So like, just bring her home. We got music instruments, as many as you can think of around our house. We got all type of art stations, just try to make home, something where there's always something to do. And even then, like, I kid you not, like clockwork, me and my wife to be watching the movie in the back, and it's not. And I'm just like, why would anybody be at our door? Like, everything these kids need, we've tried to make sure is available so that they can be engaged. And it's just like, she gets bored really fast with it. I mean, she'll be, look, I colored the whole coloring book, and I'm like, why would you do that in one day though? Like, why would you finish the book? It is just like,
because why not?
Right. Because I can.
Like, take your time. And she's like, Dad, I finished the book you told me to do. And I'm like, it wasn't about finishing it. It was about making a pretty picture, and you're just like, bro, like, but it's amazing because I see myself, and like I said, when me and my wife are talking, I'm just like, that's me though. That's what people were dealing with, and they didn't know what to do with me, and there wasn't virtual schools. You know what I'm saying? The best thing that happened to me is that I was they were doing I was getting in trouble, and then what they did was they looked at my scores. I was testing really well. So someone had the idea at the school I went to transition me up a grade. All right, and there was like an AP or an advanced class in elementary. And I basically finished in advanced schooling, and there's even a stat attached to that. Like, if you push a kid forward, they'll stay ahead. But if you hold them back, they'll stay behind. And even in college, even have to take like remedial math and reading and things like that. So I went to like advanced schooling and ended up going to a school that had music. Music was everything. Who knew? Like, the music class is what I would focus the most in. I had every music class they offered I would go to. And that's where I was able to, I mean, that got me through school. Honestly, I wouldn't have finished. I would have dropped out, no question. If it wasn't for music and being able, whoever idea it was, let's put them in advanced class, that put me on a pathway to where I ended up at an advanced school that had performing arts. And it was transformational for me. And the man I am today is because of a lot of that. That was a big blessing. The angels.
Yeah. Well, I
Those
think
people.
it brings up a question that to kind of maybe start to close out the conversation is how do I say that? What shifts for someone when they realize they're not broken? What can shift, right? And how do we, and to piggyback off that, how do we help others or help even kids realize they're not broken? Any of y'all can answer that question, but what shifts when someone realizes they're not broken, and how can we start to communicate that?
I think the potential for them to be able to do more than what they've been told they can do is the big shift. Is because they've been told they've been broken and they can't do things and they're lazy and they're this and they're that, or you'll never amount to anything because you can't sit still long enough to learn what you need to learn to do anything, of substance or value. And once they realize that not only is that not true or not right, but there's also a way you can learn the things you need to learn to be able to advance with whatever it is that you're dealing with. That is almost like the cheat code. It's like somebody handing you a roadmap. You're lost and you don't know how you're going to get where you're going to go. And somebody hands you a map and says, "Oh, this is how you get to where it is. This is why you're having this issue." It's like somebody giving you an instruction manual to something that you can't put together. And they say, "Here, this is what this looks like now." Now you're like, all of a sudden, you're like, "Oh, well, shit, if I just do this, this, and this, then I'll be able to," like, it puts me kind of closer to where I'm trying to go.
What I'll say is that, like, in the work I do now, one of the things that I get the most joy out of is, and I do it with my own kids, but like, I believe that putting things in front of young people so they can discover and see who they are. I think that giving everybody the same thing and saying just to this, is like prison for an ADHD kid or any other kid who's neurodivergent. I think it's just like, I can't do this in this environment. And I think that putting as many things in front of a person and seeing what they bite on, I got a 15-year-old, definitely ADHD, but like bass guitar, volleyball, and art. She's doing that constantly. She's doing one of them. And she reads books, so she's more like settled. And then the 8-year-old, I mean, well, she has all type of things, but she likes gymnastics. She likes running cross country. And we just like, what else you want to try? Because I believe that really the gift is if they find their thing and then you just invest where they find like what they love. I believe that that's one of the ways they can feel. They're in environments where the shame isn't there. I never felt shame in band. You know what I'm saying? I never felt shame in the music studio. I can be as wild, chaotic, and creative as I want to be in a music studio. Actually, my office is my music studio. So I have like my laptop, my work stuff, and then I have like a keyboard and drum machine. Like, that's my workspace, because right when I log off of Zoom, I'm like, let me turn this on and do something, get it out my system. And then it's like, all right, I got another meeting in 30 minutes, and I kind of shook it out and got my quick, expression out. So I think kids need that. They need to know, like, what am I even, like, what is my wiring? And the only way for them to know is to just be exposed to multiple things. I mean, that's from my experience, personally, of course.
Right.
But working with youth, that's one of the things we try to do. And we run into a lot of kids who are neurodivergent in different ways in our program. And people say, well, how do you deal with them? And we just let them be. And we just say, let's see what they grab. And it's amazing what they grab onto. And then we say, all right, let them be there, and that's how they'll spend their day every time they come with us, and let them become savant in it. Even if if we're blessed to experience it, like let them have it, let them go crazy with it, because crazy enough, like someone let me do that, and my life now is giving back to people, but I probably didn't see it that way when I was doing it. I wanted to be like everybody else, but um, I grew up with a lot of gratitude, knowing that there's a lot of guys that were like me and didn't have what I had and didn't know what they were good at, and they ended up in prison or in other places, or just not really able to identify their purpose, So.
Yeah. Scott, what's your thought?
Well, what I was thinking is like once someone feels understood, hope breaks in. And once hope breaks in, it's unstoppable.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I just think that most of the time people just want to feel understood. Life is hard. It's complicated. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to pay attention to. And I always used to joke, and Derek, you might remember this when I taught intro to counseling. I would first class, I would say, if we listened to one another like we were supposed to, we'd be out of a career and out of a job.
Mm-hmm.
But I always would joke and say, the good news for us is we all suck at listening to one another. And so we've got a career ahead of us. Right. And that's all we teach you to do, right, is to listen properly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's powerful when someone feels understood. And then all of a sudden they start to go, you know what? Maybe I'm not broken, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I see things differently, but like, that's good. Because like, what would this world be like if we all saw things the same way, right? We wouldn't get anywhere. It'd be a miserable place to be. And in fact, it's actually quite diverse and beautiful in those ways. And I am a big believer in hope. And I think once we lose that, we're in trouble, right? Individually, societally. And so I think, again, a key is feeling understood. If we can do that, we can start to go, you know what? This is not anything that I have to be ashamed of anymore. This is something that has its place. Yes, there's other environments where it's difficult, but boy, it's beautiful. Again, I can create beautiful music, amazing art, right? All the things that you can do that other folks just simply cannot do. And it doesn't make them bad. It just means your brain can. Right.
Before I answer that question, the memory keeps coming to my mind, and it's funny now looking back at it and seeing the ADHD brain. But our road trips together, and we were driving. I think we were going to San Antonio, and the song that always sticks out in my head that you came up with freestyling was "Let Me Borrow $1 and I'll pay you back tomorrow." And listen, he freestyled on this beat and with that as a verse for about 20 minutes. And like we were like, we got to do a song like that, because it was just out of nowhere, but it was like that freedom and that
his ADHD wanted us to go record it and release it.
Right.
I just wanted to just goof off.
The problem is you all forgot it after you were done with it, probably. So you couldn't, if it wasn't recorded, right?
Yeah. When I'm done with it, I don't want nothing to do with it no more. I'm like, you, no.
Yeah. But it was so funny. Yeah, it was so funny because I was like, yeah, that didn't just bang it through it. Anyway, there was a lot of those moments though, man, that I wish I could rap. I just couldn't. we would have had some good sessions. Anyway, man, I think from a lived experience, man, when you realize you're not broken, there's hope and freedom. I think for me, as a dad, as a husband, and especially as a therapist, when I started to make friends with my brain, and realizing that it was just the way that my brain is, and it's not broken, it's just built different. It's wired differently. It operates differently. That it brought freedom. It brought acceptance. It brought self-compassion. And I think that's why I get so stuck on people who think that their brain is broken, or parents who come in and, well, he has ADHD, and they say it in this way that's like they're ashamed of their kid having ADHD. And I'm like, and then the kid comes in and they're ashamed of having ADHD. What'd you say?
And exhausted,
right? Which again, I get the exhaustion. I get the parenting part. I understand it from both sides. It is this societal narrative that was created back in the day that something is broken in an ADHD kid's brain, and so they need to be medicated, and you got to treat them differently. And yes, at some level, sure, that stuff can be really beneficial to be medicated, and you do need to, maybe structure your life in different ways than what neurotypicals can, it still doesn't mean that you're broken. And I think that freedom comes when you can start to move towards recognizing that. Any final feelings, thoughts, anything before we close out the show, fellas?
Was this therapy?
I tell Derek every recording we have is therapy because he's like, you need a therapist. I was like, I have one. I have you every Sunday. That's why I do this every Sunday. And this is my therapy. I feel better about life and I go on about my business. But no, it is
No,
go ahead.
what I've been doing is learning. I'm in the process now, so I'm in that what you just described. Like I'm on that journey now, and part of it is the acceptance of just who I am and how I'm wired. A lot of it is really understanding the benefits of how I'm wired, and how far that has taken me in life, but also needing to understand like how to manage it in a way that doesn't eliminate it, but it's working for me and not against me in some circumstances. But in a lot of instances, like, of my life when I'm tracking, just down the rabbit hole of life, I'm just like, man, this thing, like, it helped me out a lot, like it's not bad, it's just different. And that was kind of one of the first realizations for me was like, it's not bad, it's different. Like the way I hear music or the way that I see things or the way that I generate ideas, and then like surrounding myself with the right people that can help me like bring things to a close, so it's like this, and this I need rolling, but having people on a team that say, okay, I'll handle that and I'll handle that and I'll handle that. It's a beautiful thing when you got a person who wants to finish things and you got a person who loves starting things working together. And that has come with me really understanding that about myself and about the way that I really hope to raise my girls that also have ADHD, and will be exploring their young brains young, and we don't say it to them a lot. We don't like rub it in their faces, and that's ADHD. It's kind of something we say silently, but we try to make sure we're creating an environment for them to thrive. So the more I learn about me, it's going to help me serve my kids and other young people even better. So maybe we check back in 3-4 months or 6 months and see where I'm at, and see if I'm on my meds yet, because I'm on the borderline of getting meds. I'm just gonna tell you.
Yeah.
Let me say this too. What's that guanfacine? What is that? It's a slow release thing, and they're like, it takes 2 weeks to kick in. That's what the doctor told me. So I was taking it. It takes 2 weeks to kick in. So what you think happened?
You didn't make it 2 weeks.
I forgot to take it. I literally was like, I don't feel anything different. It takes a while to kick in, and then I just forgot to took it, and like 2 weeks passed, and he messaged me, and I was like, oh shoot, I only took it like the first couple of days, and then I forgot about it, and I'm just like, worst ADHD medicine ever. Like medicine that takes 2 weeks to work is the worst idea for a person with ADHD. Eliminate that drug from the market. I would like to sign a petition.
All right, we'll start that. Scott, any final?
I need immediate help.
Immediate now, right now. At least give a temporary dose of Adderall while you're trying to let the 2 weeks kick in.
Yeah.
Right. Scott, any final feelings, thoughts, anything?
No, just a good conversation. I mean, again, I think the more we normalize anything in mental health, it's always a positive. So yeah, I'm glad we got to have the conversation.
Yeah, well, I appreciate y'all, man. We didn't say this when we started, but this is actually episode 20 for us on the MAJO Podcast. And so the big deal about episode 20 is that only 1% of podcasts make it 20 episodes. Most people actually quit after 5. And so ADHD didn't win this time. We have made it to episode 20, so we appreciate y'all being a part of this monumental episode. So everyone after this just keeps us in that top 1% of creators. So awesome. It's a huge thing, man. So, well, if this episode hit close to home and you spent years believing you're broken or failing, maybe today you have a different lens to view through. understanding your brain works understanding how your brain works doesn't make you weaker. It gives you clarity. All right. So we'll be back next Wednesday with episode 21. Should you get it out of your system before you say I do? That one's going to stir up a lot of different kinds of conversations.
This guy's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Man alive, I have to come back for 21.
Right, right. So
got some thoughts on that.
Yeah, so Scott's like, I want to be a part of that one.
I just want to, I'm gonna have to see how y'all did that.
Yeah, so well, make sure you're following at the MAJO Podcast on all social media, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, so you don't miss that episode, this episode, or any of the clips or behind the scenes that we show. So we'll see y'all next week for another real, raw, unfiltered conversation. And all this drops on New Year's too, so Happy New Year.
Take care.